Yes, Mr. Gecko, you're a huge inspiration to us all. But who was your muse?
Oh, my dear old Nan. She imparted many wise words to me. She would say, never let the fame get to your head, always remember who you are, and let people get more than just savings with Geico's fast and friendly claim support. I lived up to her advice, and now anyone can file a claim anywhere and anytime. I miss her so much.
Did she go somewhere?
Yeah, extended quilting trip.
Ah.
Get more than just savings. Get more with Geico.
Have you ever been in the middle of an argument and felt like you couldn't find your way out? Like you're trapped in some cycle of conflicting opinions and stubborn positions, not knowing how to escape. Maybe it's with a coworker, a family member, or even a stranger online. The exhausting back and forth where nobody seems to give an inch can leave you wondering if there's a way to find common ground without giving up what you believe in. I'm going to be honest, I've always been pretty opinionated. And I've justified this because, well, I do a lot of research. So at least I'm not drawing a line in the sand before I've sifted through said sand, you know? Just last week, we talked about the power of sovereignty and how if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. So isn't it a good thing to figure out who you are and what you're about? I've thought about this a lot, and I recently had a pretty big realization. I have a friend who's an amazing listener. We could be in an Uber in Mexico with a language barrier, and she would know the driver's life story before I even realized that the car was moving. Over the years of our friendship, I've shared a lot of information about theories I've discovered, ideas I've been forming, ideologies I've adopted. And one day it hit me that I don't actually know where she stands on most of those issues. But I don't feel like I don't know her. Quite the opposite, actually. And so if I think about what does this friend stand for, what comes up isn't a political party or a movement that she's for or against. What I see is a deep listener, an open mind, a kind heart. And I realized that those qualities or values are her deeper truth. On the other hand, I have another friend who leads with his beliefs. I know where he stands on every political issue and ideology. Sometimes, if our beliefs align, it makes me feel closer to him. But when they don't, it feels like there's a wall between us. And if I ever changed my beliefs, I'd wonder about our friendship. The other friend, I know I could have a major shift in perspective, and she would just be open to hearing about how I got there. We often try to show who we are by what we believe. And in a way, that becomes true. Because if we identify with our belief system, it's who we become, and it's who others see us as. But if we identify with a deeper set of values, then we start to see everything else as just the armor we wear, the outfit we have on. Who we truly are is always beyond that. And if we can get over ourselves long enough to connect on that level, I honestly believe our entire world would change. So that's what we're talking about today. Our guest is Justin Jones-Fosu. He's the embodiment of energy, both at home and at the top of the world's highest peaks. He even recently conquered one of the famous 7 summits. And he's also the author of books like Your Why Matters Now, The Inclusive Mindset, and his latest work, I Respectfully Disagree, How to Have Difficult Conversations in a Divided World. So 3 key things we will learn are how to plant seeds of change within your relationships, how to challenge your perspective and understand others more deeply, and how to use an inside-out approach when dealing with disagreements. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let's be real about something. Workplace stress is not just part of the job anymore. 61% of people are dealing with stress levels that are way beyond normal, and it is not sustainable. I used to think that grinding through stress was some kind of badge of honor. Push harder, sleep less, ignore what your body was telling you. And it nearly broke me when I was working for startups. And look, maybe that voice in your head telling you to make a change is right. Maybe you do need to quit your job or completely flip your life. But whether you're making big moves or just trying to survive your current situation, you need tools to handle it well. And that's where therapy comes in. Modern therapy teaches you how to set boundaries without the guilt, how to trust your intuition instead of second guessing yourself constantly, how to make better decisions from a place of clarity instead of chaos. And BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists. They've got a 4.9 rating from 1.7 million reviews because it actually works. You can talk to someone from anywhere, and you can switch therapists anytime if it's not the right fit. A vacation won't fix chronic stress, but the right support can help you navigate whatever comes next. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Unwind from work with BetterHelp. My listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/mindlove. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mindlove. Can we talk about back to school chaos for a second? The kids are getting back into routines, everyone's schedules are crazy, and suddenly you're supposed to have dinner on the table every night like some kind of magician. But want to know what I figured out? Shopping, planning, and cooking food really can be simple and stress-free, which is why I love Hungry Root. Hungry Root takes the stress out of mealtime by filling your cart with personalized picks and planning your week of meals, getting smarter with every order. With over 15,000 recipes to choose from each week, many ready in just 15 minutes or less, it's a huge lifesaver on those busy weeknights. I personally love their Smart Cart technology. It learns what I actually like and then recommends groceries, recipes, and supplements tailored to my tastes and needs. Plus, I love the kids' snack section where I get these really easy snacks to just keep in the car or throw in our to-go bags or lunch boxes for those of you who need them. They screen out over 200 additives, including high fructose corn syrup and artificial sweeteners. They only source high-quality meat and seafood with no hormones or antibiotics, and they carry trusted brands like Oatly and Vital Farms. The time that I have gotten back has been incredible. Take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/mindlove and use code MINDLOVE. That's hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/mindlove, code MINDLOVE.
It's not that people are narcissists. It's not that majority of people are self-absorbed. They're simply trying to form connections. But what we found is that oftentimes in trying to find and form connections, we end up taking control. It's almost like talking to a place and like, hey, I went to this really great vegan spot. And they're like, oh, but have you been to this one, right? Instead of what made it a really great vegan spot. what resonated with you? Why did you like that place? What was it about the food? Was it the atmosphere? But we don't ask deeper questions. So that's one way that we can really lean in to deeply listen and to at least engage with that third level at a minimum.
Turn up your frequency with Mind Love. Bite-sized brain hacks for seekers, dreamers, and doers. It's time to give your mind a little love with your host, Melissa Monti.
So what inspired you to cover the topic of respectful disagreements?
I'll give it to you in two different ways. First is the foundation, which is my mom. Growing up, we didn't have a lot at the stint of being unhoused and all these things, but my mom still made sure we went out to experience difference. So we went to Oktoberfest and Polish festivals, Hispanic Heritage Month, and we went even to events that we disagreed with, Melissa. And I remember sitting there in the seats like, why are we even here, Mom? We don't even agree with this. But what my mom was doing was we're planting seeds of humanity in me. And as I interviewed my mom for this book, one of the things that she shared is a powerful story. So my mom was one of the first Black female air traffic controllers in the Air Force. And she shared there were sometimes she'd be stationed in Japan, and there are some soldiers who in that same 2-year time frame never left base. And she was like, Justin, I don't want you and your brother to be like that, to never leave your home base, to get to experience the beauty of the people and cultures around you. And so fast forward, I'm doing work on the inclusive mindset, which is about every single one of us, no matter what we look like and all that kind of stuff. And I remember I would always make this statement in my inclusive mindset presentations and consulting is that we can vehemently disagree with someone's ideology and still passionately pursue their humanity. And it was always just like audible groan, like, ooh, like, yes. And people would come up afterwards and they were like, Justin, I really loved your statement. I loved that. I loved it. So but how do we do it? Or or and like, but what if they say this? And so this book became the answer to my participants and our clients' request about how to do it in a way that's practical, heart-based, and really kind of fit the need of what's not really out there.
I love how you say heart based. I feel like it's this ignored part of us, unless you're in the spiritual community, and then it's all about heart opening. But it took me years and years of self development to really understand what that heart centered feeling is. I remember being in a breathwork moon circle and we were doing a heart opening breathwork. And about halfway through, something like popped and I just started bursting into tears. And ever since I've made it a practice to really bring my attention to my heart, especially when I'm having a disagreement, because I've noticed that when I am heated with somebody, my vision just gets tunneled. And I remember learning from an NLP practitioner that we could, something as simple as just bringing our attention to our periphery could ease our anxiety because we do get that tunnel vision. And I remember practicing that and then thinking, I wonder what would happen if I brought that attention to my heart instead. And I've noticed I could very clearly suddenly focus on the connection with that other person. And it's like soul to soul. And one of the things you talk about is the heart, head, and hand model. Can you
Yeah.
go deeper on that?
Yeah. So the way we approach the heart, head, hand model is most times the focus has been on the head first, right? Let me tell you what to do, right? So here's what you do. Here's deep breaths. Here's take a moment here. Think about what you would do for the, And so it's a lot of great work, and technique is awesome and amazing. But what we wanted to do is not just focusing on what to do and then encouraging people to do it. We want to focus on why we should do it in the first place. Why, and for us, we call that the heart. And so it's the why, it's the stories behind it. It's desiring to treat others better than we may treat them, especially those that we disagree with. It's about choosing to listen and dive in deep to create better relationships, right? Because a lot of times people look at this book and they're like, "Oh, is this just for the big stuff? Like, all the societal stuff?" I'm like, "No, this could be for your partner. This could be for the person that you're going to work or your neighbor as you're having conversations. So it could be as big as what's happening around wars and all these things, and having conversations about that. To simple as is could Leonardo DiCaprio survive in a little plank of wood, right, in Titanic? And so how we engage these conversations first for us, it starts from the heart because we realize that in our research and our studies that most people, long lasting transformation doesn't happen just at head level. Because think about for all of us, we know certain things, but we don't do it. And what is the thing that's stopping us? And for us, it's that transformation that happens in the heart first, then to the head about, okay, now here's what to do, and then the hand, which is how to do it. And so the why to do, the what to do, and then the how to do is important. But where we start, we found is paramount. So we're always starting with connecting to people's hearts, whether that's through stories, whether that's helping people to think through their own journey, whether that's through therapy and counseling. Those are some of the ways that we practice the heart.
I love how you emphasize that it's sometimes just those small everyday interactions that really make the big difference. We're always thinking about all these big things on a grander scale. What I'm always sharing is if you see something in the world that you feel needs to be changed, but you have that same thing living within you and you're not willing to address it, you're never going to see that change. There can be massive global shifts, but you won't even be able to recognize them because on your personal level, you're experiencing them over and over and over again, which is why people say that everyone is living in their own world. There are some people that go to the same workplace every day, shop at the same stores, and they think the world is this evil place while somebody else sees it's full of connection. And it's because you're projecting. And both of those things are true, but we're going to experience the one that we're pulling in based on our own interactions. And oftentimes, those little everyday moments, I mean, all the time, those are what is adding up to our entire world experience. How we interact with our partner on a day-to-day basis is what we're going to be seeing in the rest of the world. And so I just love bringing things back because so often people are like, well, there's all these shifts that need to happen in the world. And it just seems hopeless. And it's like, well, focus on you. Focus on you first and see what you can shift in your own world. and then
Yeah.
watch that. It's almost magic the way it seems to unfold around us.
Yeah, that's a brilliant statement and brilliant philosophy because it can be easy and just like all of us, like we all get sucked into that at times. Like, is it worth it, right? Why should I even try? Why should I lean in to have a conversation with someone? And that's why for us in writing, I respectfully disagree. It was very important to focus on that very same sentiment. And we always ask people, who is the only person that you and I can control? And yes, our kids. And so, no, I'm joking because I've tried it. I have two, now four, and it doesn't work. But our pets, no, we can't even control our pets. But ourselves, right? So this is not a technique to, get people to do what you want them to do, right? Because a lot of times people think, well, if I say these magic words, will they now do what I or believe what I say? No, no, no. It's no matter how that person responds, no matter how that person reacts, no matter where that person ends, we can still build bridges to them rather than barriers from them. And that's why I think it's important. And then we can see that sometimes in this work, and I tell people all the time, in respectful disagreement work, we are sometimes just called to be seed planters. And that's hard in a society that caters to microwaves because we want to see the immediate fruit rather than maybe I was just supposed to just plant a seed. Maybe I was supposed to water a seed that was already planted, and I may not see the fruit of the work. I may not see the increase of it, but it does take me choosing to be faithful to being a seed planter with that person, no matter how they respond. So what you said, Melissa, was brilliant because that's in our spheres of the world that begin to impact other spheres, and those spheres begin to add up. But it also makes us feel better in the process. So yeah.
Can you explain the concept of golden respect and why it's so central to improving our interactions with people?
Yeah, so we, in diving into the book, one of the things that we began to uncover as we talked about respectful disagreements, well, we found it necessary to actually define what respect is because we noticed that there is a wide variety of what people choose and think about respect. So I'm not going to go over all 10 characteristics, but there's a societal respect, and then it's what we call golden respect of how we define it. And so I'll give you a couple. One, the misperception or societal perception around respect is that respect must be earned. And our retort back to that is why? Why and who told us that respect has to be earned? We can't give a person respect unless they earn it from us or we earn it from them. No, we have the free power to choose to respect others no matter what. It's our gift. We call respect a distant cousin of forgiveness because we finally realized that forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about me. And so that's the same thing. So golden respect is that respect is our choice to freely give. Another societal perception of respect is that a title grants you respect. Right? I remember listening to a radio show several months ago, and it was like, we should respect our elderly. And I was like, yes, we should. And we should respect the youth. And we should respect, because there's this perception about a title, right? And even for me as a parent of 4.5 kids of a dog, it's, it can be really easy to like, I'm the parent. I deserve quote unquote respect because of my title. No, my kids deserve respect. And there's been many times where unfortunately I've disrespectfully disagreed with them. And so a title doesn't grant you respect. A person's humanity grants you respect. And that's a characteristic, a golden characteristic of respect. And the last one I'd speak to is that respect means honor. And we're like, no, that's a societal definition that if I respect you, that means I honor you or hold you in high regard in terms of your ideology and what you believe. We can choose, and this is that gray space, and this is very intentional, is that I can choose to hold you as a human being in high regard because you're a human being, even if I choose to hold your ideology in very low regard, if at any regard at all. And that is our unique opportunity to engage. So golden respect means I don't have to hold you in all that you believe and stands with you in high regard, but the humanity of who you are, I can. And so those are just three ways that what we call golden respect, where it's about the individual, the humanity of the person. It's always our choice to engage this person with respect, and it's not about matching their energy. I'm not going to give you back what you give me. I can still choose to engage you in ways that leave you feeling fully acknowledged.
Right. It's like, stop taking karma into your own hands. Karma will do that
Good
on its
word.
own.
That's a great word.
I was just sharing with my coaching clients that around the concept of love, so often we give other people more credit than we give ourselves. And one of those facets is in love. When somebody breaks up with us or even somebody dies, we feel like we lose that love. But when you really consider falling in love with somebody, who's feeling that? Who holds that love? That person doesn't hold that love. That love is activated inside of you. And when you look at it that way, whereas people have the ability to activate things inside of you, you realize your own power to a greater level. Because in the same way with the respect thing, if you are requiring somebody to earn your respect, that means you're holding disrespect. That disrespect is in your body. If you choose, I'm going to be respectful, I'm going to be loving, I'm going to be forgiving, and you carry that with you in whatever interaction, whether you think that person deserves it or not, your sense of peace is not disrupted when somebody is a poor model of a human being, in your opinion. Your sense of peace is not disrupted when somebody is a poor model of a human being, in your opinion.
Yeah, no, I have nothing to add to that. I think you're spot on. It's our choice, and that's what we emphasize. I will make this statement because I think sometimes we confuse when talking about individuals and people's perspectives. We bring and we tightly couple their ideology and their identity. That's a tightly coupled thing. And sometimes we do that for ourselves. So one thing that we often share, because it's been this really big, not movement, but you hear this phrase often. And so I've started to kind of pick at it a little bit, is that, Melissa, we just need to be a little bit more open-minded. All right. And I'm like, yes, there are some things, right? So Carol Dweck's work on mindset, there are some really good things that can challenge us to be more open-minded. But let's be real. There are some things that you and I and every single listener is closed-minded on, right? Based upon our character, our values, things that we hold to be dear and close to us. But this is the truth, is that even for those things that we are closed-minded on, we should never stop being open-hearted. And what does that mean? That means that I can still engage you as an individual and give you dignity, value, and worth, even if I think every ounce of what you just told me was rubbish. That I can still hold that tension and truth that you should still be valued, fully acknowledged, even if I don't think your ideology should be. And so that's that distinction, because I think a lot of people, they hold those two things together, and it's hard to leave conversations where a person can feel fully acknowledged, even if I don't agree at all with what they share.
And no one wants to come to the side that they don't feel seen in. And so if you have an opposite ideology and you want to, I've swapped sides on a lot of different issues over my life, because I do pride myself in staying open-minded, and I'm always open to new information. And not only do I personally learn new information, we as a society learn new information after pushing things out and then seeing the side effects. And one of my pet peeves is when people just double down when all the evidence is showing maybe that wasn't a good move. Yeah, and I don't know. And then it just comes to, I don't know, well, we had to do something or whatever. And it's just like, that's just not how I live my life. I'd rather go back and say, I think I was wrong there. I thought because of this, I thought I was erring on the side of caution, and I just wasn't, that wasn't right. But when I met, because I am so open-minded, there's some views that I hold that are just not where the masses are at all. Like, I go deep into spirituality. I love to study the intersection of science and spirituality. And so there's certain people I talk to and it's just over their head. And there's some people that meet that with interesting, and they ask questions and they never agree with anything I say, but they are receptive to figuring out who I am. And I think that's what we miss sometimes, is that there's some of those beliefs that it's become a part of who I am and the way I view the world. And so When I feel embraced, I don't care if that person agrees with any of the things. It's how they met me in my own beliefs. And when we're meeting somebody else with just a, gosh, that's stupid, or I can't believe this person is so dense. I don't even understand how they come to these things. Like, nobody wants to be like you. So they're just going to be drilled into their own side so much more than if, like, you don't have to agree with somebody to deeply listen and to just see them and meet them where they are. And I just think that's forgotten.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's forgotten. I think it's if we ever remembered it in the first place. I want to give some ways for people to practically lean into those areas. We create what we call the 5 pillars of bridging the divide to help to walk through, how do we build more how do we build more bridges to people rather than barriers from them. And so one of those is cultivate your curiosity. So pillar number 3 is it's how do we ask more questions when we don't know what to say, using the power phrase, tell me more. We talk about one practice of deep listening because, again, it was one of those things that's like just deeply listening. We're like, well, let's give people a way to do that, a tool. And we call it the power of 3. And so the power of 3, it's where I listen at least to the third level of the conversation, because most times things start at the surface. And so if I'm saying, hey, Melissa, how are you doing today? And you're like, oh, I'm fine. I'm like, oh, I'm fine too. That's power 1. If I was like, Melissa, how you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. What made you fine? I heard this interesting bald head speaker. Oh, I remember that bald head guy. All right. That's power of 2. But power of 3 is like, Melissa, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. What made you fine? Oh, I heard this interesting bald head speaker. What made him interesting? Oh, he's talking about, ways that we can deep listen, ways that we can engage each other, fully acknowledge each other. Oh, is there anything else that I should learn? It's when we are able to dive into that third level, at least, not, because there's some rule followers that are like 1, 2, right? And then think that they can jump in at that point. It's no, at least to the third level where you're asking questions, you're hearing. And what I often find from people that we work with is that it's not that people are narcissists. It's not that majority of people are self-absorbed. They're simply trying to form connections. But what we found is that oftentimes in trying to find and form connections, we end up taking control. It's almost like talking to a place and like, hey, I went to this really great vegan spot. And they're like, oh, but have you been to this one, right? Instead of what made it a really great vegan spot. what resonated with you? Why did you like that place? What was it about the food? Was it the atmosphere? But we don't ask deeper questions. So that's one way that we can really lean in to deeply listen and to at least engage with that third level at a minimum. And I liken that to one of the quotes and our mantras that I do my best to live by. I fail often, but I make really good attempts. And that's that I seek to be more interested than interesting. And when I go into positions, that's why I hate networking events. But when I encounter people, I challenge myself as best as I can. Justin, what would it look like for you to be more interested in others rather than interesting to others? And so that leans me into asking more questions, to engaging. And the last I'd say is the concept that we can always fully acknowledge someone. And that's our 5th pillar, said that we can agree to respect. And if full acknowledgement simply means that I choose to acknowledge you. Let me give you 3 ways that a person can fully acknowledge someone. 1, wow, Melissa, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I've never heard that before. 2, Melissa, you mentioned 3 things about spirituality. Wow, number 2 seemed really interesting. I think I want to do a little bit more research on that area. 3, I could tell this was a really tough conversation, Melissa, for us to have. I really appreciate you leaning in because a lot of people wouldn't do it. In none of those examples did I say I agreed with you. No, but I chose to fully acknowledge you. It's what Zhan Zhao, a Stanford professor, talks about. She calls it thank you because. And she's like, no, most of the times as we encounter information that we disagree with, we use no because. No because I think that's stupid. No because that's wrong. No because why would anybody think? Rather than thank you because I appreciate you sharing your perspective, right? And it doesn't always require me retorting or telling you I disagree. It doesn't always. I've had conversations with people that have views and beliefs that are vastly different than mine, and I make the call in that moment, like, is this something that's really important for me to dive in deep to share my perspective, or is this just one of those moments where I just fully lean in and listen and engage the person, and if they ask my perspective, I'll share it. But if they don't, I don't need to be able to engage it. And so I think what you shared is just it's spot on, is that we can actually deeply listen to people with the power of three, but we can also leave people fully acknowledged. Full acknowledgement does not mean full agreement, but we often conflate the two.
Right. It's like we think that if we honor another person, we're validating their worldview. And then we feel this threat internally. Like if we validate their worldview, then like somehow it makes it more real. I don't know why, but
Right.
I just found we get like this contraction for just allowing that person to safely have their own beliefs. And it's funny because in 2020, I made a vow to more deeply understand the other side because I just felt really on my side of politics. And funny enough, I actually came out not the other side, but right in the middle. I saw why both people agree. Learning the other people's views made me go back and learn the views on my side, kind of see how things were done. And I came out pretty strongly disagreeing with both sides. And so it did really shift my views. But one of the questions I made a point to ask people was, what in your life experience makes that feel important? Because so often what I realized when I was doing that research was that everything I thought about the other side was not necessarily true. Certain points were true, but the reasons they got there were all very different. And so, and that's how both sides turns each other against the other one. They say this blanket statement and they say it's because of this, some evil thing, when really it's like, no, I don't trust the government. No, I don't and so that's why I want to protect myself, not I think everyone should have guns or whatever it is. And so, but I like your way of doing it because I found that it's difficult. It becomes more difficult to meet somebody with that any sort of acknowledgement when I know them very deeply, because it's like they've already become a caricature. And I think that happens, especially with specific beliefs. And I'm thinking specifically of like, I have some very religious people in my family, and I can see, like, example, I wrote a poem the other day and I posted it on social media, and I asked somebody what they thought when I was on the phone, and it's like, I just don't understand this "you are the universe" thing. And it was immediate, like, and in my mind, and it might have been true, but I can see all of the biblical spirituality coming up. This can't be real. This has to be against what I believe. And it's like we've become caricatures to each other in those situations. So I'm sharing just a poem and she's looking at it as the religious antithesis, and I'm seeing her very vague response as her coming. And so it's like we bring all this meaning in. And so I love that practice of just deepening the neural pathways of just being solid in who I am, but also just giving that little energy of honor, I guess, rather than immediate contraction.
Yeah, and for me, it's, and I want to be very clear, it's honoring of the person, not necessarily the ideology.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting gray space. It's what we talk about. My last TEDx was called "Don't Take the Exit on People," and part of it is because, Melissa, as you know, like our brains are wired to take the exit on people. Give you a great example. Monday through Friday, you're supposed to, Monday through Friday, you take the exit, right? And when you're driving, if you have the privilege of driving, you take this exit. And, one day you're supposed to go straight, but what do? Well, we take the exit because our brains are wired to conserve energy for things it thinks it doesn't know. And so when we are on social media, news, and other places, we get the second and third hand information, and we start categorizing it for later use. And we do that with people. And so we start what we call filling in the gaps with conclusions rather than curiosity. So instead of asking deeper questions, instead of, that person, you ask them what they think of the poem, they're like, well, it was an interesting poem. I was processing it. They could have easily come back and say, well, I'd love to hear what inspired you to write it. Right? You know what I'm saying? Or when you mentioned something that a universe, what did you mean by universe? Right? Because it allows us to have a deeper understanding. And that's the thing. We often, in a pillar 4 that talk about seek the gray, what we realize is that we are sometimes defining words or saying things, and we have 2 totally different definitions of it. Right? It's what I love. Like right now, this whole conversation around diversity and all that kind of stuff, and people are like, oh, I don't like diversity, and I think it's not needed. And I'm like, my first retort isn't, how dare you? Why do you want to take us back? My first retort back is, tell me how you define diversity, and then I listen. And then I often find how I define it and how they may even define it are vastly different, because diversity is all of us. It's not just the big three of race, gender, and identity, right? It's about religious and social and spiritual and all these other things, these economic, and it involves every single person in part of our growth and our development as people. And so sometimes just coming and asking those questions to make sure we're actually having the same conversation is one of those pivotal things that can help us in those moments of respectful disagreement. And so that's what I would encourage people. It's ask more questions, seek to be more interested, fill in the gaps with curiosity rather than conclusions. If you don't know what to say, tell me more. Tell me more about that. And then sometimes it doesn't require, again, I want to keep coming back to that, because because I'm not going to blame social media, but I think social media has been a part of where I can just leave my one-liners. I can just leave my perspective and be done with it. Right? Where it's my truth, it's my page. I struggled with Justin struggled with that, where I had to be open to hearing perspectives and others and not confining myself to my circles of comfort. So I want to give one last practical way that people can enlarge their circles, because if some people are like, Justin, that sounds really good, but I struggle with enlarging my circles with hearing from people who are different. Let me give you a way to lean into this. So I did this because I realized I wasn't living up to my mom's ideal, right? I was confining myself. Instead of leaving home base, I was staying home base and only engaging with people I agreed with, believed the same as I did, all these kind of things. And so at the time, I called it the 6-month challenge. Now we've elevated it and called it the Circles of Grace challenge. But essentially, every 6 months to 12 months, sometimes it's different frequency of time, I challenge myself to go to events, experiences, or engage with people and either I don't know a lot about and or that I disagree with. And I pick a topic for that month, not for that month, for that time frame of 6 months or a year, and I lean in. And so I've had different topics in terms of from Muslims to policing and police officers, to women in the workplace, to Indian culture, right? And so there's been different reasons and why I've come to those places about things I either disagree with or don't know a lot about. But I think it's really a powerful tool that we can employ in our lives to begin to start leaning in. We can't cover everything. We can't learn about everything all at the same time. But what if we strategically built in opportunities for learning and growing in our understanding about others?
I used to have a really difficult time with not responding to things that I disagreed with online. It was like I was pregnant. When I was pregnant, there was a whole period of time, and the world was crazy at that time. And so,
Tell me more.
I'll give myself a little bit of a pass. I ended up, somebody I really respected had posted something, and I ended up like getting back in a back and forth Twitter like tiff, and then he texted me on the side. He's like, "Don't waste your time." And it's like I needed to hear it from that person. And he was like, "There's going to be people that are going to disagree regardless, and you're just wasting energy." And so ever since I've made it a practice, sometimes I still find myself like adding a comment and then I'm like, delete. And it gets easier every single time. But a similar thing happened to me the other day. I landed on a podcast and I thought it was something different. Then I was like, oh, this is opposite of whatever thing I believe around here. And I was like, that's probably exactly what you should listen to right now then. And so I started listening to it, and it was a reminder of like, man, the studies that they were talking about, I've actually studied the other side, and I've seen studies that say the exact opposite. So a reminder to all of us, there is supposed evidence for everything that we believe out there. That's a reminder for me that I'm like, if I know that these aren't real, then I can't know that, which means I can't know that the things I've read are soundproof. You know what I mean? And so, it was a good practice just to listen to that. I disagreed with most things that they said, but I just breathed through it. And I'm like, this is a good habit to get into, is like being able to be in the presence and just hold space for things and know that it doesn't require a response,
Yeah.
even, like it's perfectly okay that these people believe something different than me, and it's not ruining the world. And I should, so often our nervous system reacts as though if we allow this person to keep believing that, the world is going to end. And a lot of our ideologies reinforce that. It's like, no, if they
Yeah.
don't use paper straws, the world is ending in 18 years. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. But there is some to provide some gray to that. There are some things that are extremely harmful that people believe that can hurt people, that can cause damage to individuals and institutions and society at large. And so I want to speak to that a little bit because sometimes people have brought that up of like, well, what if they have this type of belief? And so I want to share a story that has been pivotal for me and helped me to really understand deeper to this, especially the seed planting aspect. And it's one of my former colleagues who used to be, or was a former skinhead. And for those who know what skinhead is, very racist, misogynist views and different things. If anybody saw the movie Higher Learning back in the day, Remy was considered a skinhead. So, and I was just really curious about his journey, about like how he got in, how he got out, all these things. And that's why, first, you said something earlier that I want to really highlight and say that was awesome. Our world experiences shape every single one of us. That's why I love Oprah, and I forgot the neuroscience guy, but they wrote a book called What Happened to You? And they've changed that conversation from what's wrong with you to what happened to you, because a lot of who we are and who we become have been things that have happened to us, right? Whether it's traumas or just aspects of our general life, right? Even how we disagree. Like one of our chapters is called A Picture of the Past, where I challenge people to go back to their childhood and how was disagreement modeled for them? What was it like? Were you a child that was told to just children should only be seen and not heard, right? Or in your early career, what did disagreement look like? Because it's often impacted us in our journeys. Not talking about my physical abuse that I endured that led me or was not led me, but was a part of me leaning into being a very aggressive, disrespectful disagreeer because I was no longer going to be that little kid that couldn't fend for himself. So how does all that play out? So one of the pieces that's been very paramount in talking and hearing this guy's story was, he's like, Justin, I loved it when people used to call me names. He's like, we love that stuff. We are fueled by it. When you used to call us racist and misogynist, he was like, we love that. The seeds of change, he said, that were the catalyst for his change were the very same people that he disrespected and demeaned that still chose to respect him. And he was like, Justin, they will never know because they didn't run in the same circles. But it's like when I've had those trans encounters where they stopped and asked me my story or what led me to have these types of views or how did I get here or da-da-da, right? And he's like, I knew they didn't agree with what I believed, but he's like, I got to a place where I couldn't compute, continuing to disrespect people who still showed me respect. And so that's just an opportunity for every single one of us. That's where the seed planter aspect came in for me, is just realizing that sometimes even in our goodness, and even if we feel like we hold truths and what somebody believes could actually be harmful to other people and or groups of people, it's, one, not physically allowing them to engage in acts that will harm people. Yes, those need to be in place and laws and all those kind of things. But two, is that sometimes my role is just to be a seed planter for them, because yelling and screaming back at them and all these kind of things hasn't really proved to change hearts. It's usually just proved to be throw gasoline on the fire. And it's really what I've realized. It's really more about us than it is about them. And that's where I had to come to grips with one aspect of disagreement. Am I disagreeing in a way that's going to add to the conversation, or am I just getting it off my chest? And so post May 25, 2020, which was a really, really impactful time for me. May 25th is first my birthday, and the death of amazing soul. One of the things that I had a lot of people reach out to me, and they were like, Justin, we know you're a bridge builder. How are you feeling? What's going on? How are you feeling about this murder and all those kind of things? And I just told people, I need a moment. I need a moment, because if I respond right now, it's going to be to get stuff off my chest rather than to have a helpful conversation. Now, I had people I could get stuff off my chest with. I had a support group, had a therapist. I still have a therapist able to talk about all these things. But with people that were really in that space of trying to figure out what to do next, I wanted to have an opportunity to talk to them in a way that was helpful and not harmful. And so we have to be mindful of where we are and that emotional intelligence, that self awareness about, am I just getting this off my chest, or am I actually helping the conversation?
Yeah, someone once told me, as you grow in the public eye, just be mindful of processing in public. And it's just something that's stuck with me. And it's such great advice because number one, I think shows qualities of a leader because people like being told what to do, as sad as it is. I feel like a big part of my platform is trying to teach people how to be that leader for themselves. But we still do look to others. Like, how do I react to this? Whether we like it or not, we're all mirrors for one another. And I think it's healthy to have whatever emotions that you have. And I am a big advocate of showing emotions in public because it gives permission for other people. But it's the conclusions, I think, of the processing where a lot of times after I allow whatever it is to fully be felt, I come out with a different response. I'm allowing myself to integrate the emotion and then the release of the emotion and then decide versus being reactionary. And that's really what that kind of responding quickly would do. And most often though, in that high emotion, we feel pretty sure in whatever we're thinking right then. And so it does take that big kind of pause beforehand to say, I am going to give myself space. But I love that you did that and then also shared with people who did reach out, because that alone is a way to model a way of being for people who don't necessarily have that structure for themselves.
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so good. Listen, I think to your point of modeling behavior, that's seed planting to me, right? It's like, how do we model the behavior for others, and just being able to engage people right where they are. And it's one of the things we're really big on. It's like some people think that respectful disagreement means talking at a very calm tone and just getting along, being nice and polite. That's not what we're talking about, right? Because I'm very passionate. If you grew up in my household, we're very fiery, very passionate people, right? We joke on each other often. I mean, we have very elevated arguments. I won't call them heated, but elevated ones where, somebody from the outside may be like, oh, they're disrespecting each other. No, we're not, right? Because disrespect can't come from just the outward position of things, right? And so just because I've an elevated voice is different, right? Because culture plays into it. That's a big part of it. There's some cultures who are very expressive and they talk in that way. And there's some cultures who, if you elevate your voice, it's seen as a quote unquote sign of disrespect. And so we have to be mindful of how we interact and engage with each other. Yes. But just because you're passionate, just because you elevate your voice, just because you may stand up and be like, well, tell me more about that, right? Doesn't mean I'm disrespecting you. And that's why we have to get away from the outward appearance of what respect looks like to the inward. And outward would say, just be polite, just use calm tone. Versus you can do all that stuff and still be disrespecting someone because you're doing it in your heart. You're being condescending. You're not really truly listening and trying to engage them. You're trying to win a battle by being very strategic in how you posture yourself and the kind of words that you say to lead somebody what you want them to do. That's not true respectful disagreement. Respectful disagreement is an inside out approach, not just the external aspects of what you do. So you're spot on.
Thank you for saying that. I feel like I've been waiting my whole life to hear that. And when I get passionate about anything, I'm a loud talker. And there's the reminder of none of us knows anything for sure. There's a huge part of me, if I'm being totally honest, that I mean, we know the media plays us against each other. We know that they take the most fired up topics and make those the forefront of everything so that it's these really emotionally charged things, when in reality, if you really sit down and talk to people, those aren't the things that they're talking about on the day-to-day basis at all, because it doesn't necessarily affect their life. And they do that on purpose. And so there's a big part of me that wonders, how many things in the news are just fake? Are they just creating stories? And to be honest, we don't No, none of us knows anything. And so to get too attached and identified with any of these beliefs, I'm always just like, oh, I'm not playing into that. Sorry. I
Yeah.
can't guarantee it's even real. So my only point is that we need to allow the openness in our mind to be like, as sure as I feel about this, I could be wrong, no matter what
Yep.
it is.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that. That was powerful, Melissa, because you hit the head on something that is becoming a statement for me. One of my friends, James, is like a curiosity guy. He makes a statement. He's like, "What if we What if we listen to people as if we're actually wrong, right? And just saying, hey, I could be wrong on this. Let me listen to them in a way that I'm not trying to validate or have confirmation bias in my own perspective, but what if I listen to them like I'm actually wrong?" I think that is a powerful way to listen to people, to ask deeper questions, to open ourselves to hear. And then we may come out on the other side and be like, no, I was not wrong, right? Or we may say, hey, from what I believe, that's not to be, I don't believe that to be true. And that's why Pillar 4, Seek the Gray, is so important because it's about how do we find that common ground? Where is that place of common ground, right? Sometimes the bare bones of that is the common ground of shared humanity, right? Then that's just the bare bone. But sometimes that common ground is like I can tell we both really care about the safety of our families. Now, how we get there could be very different. But finding that gray, and gray's not 50-50, gray could sometimes be 90-10, it could be 40-60. That's so important to me because I remember when I was doing my MBA, I had a really cool, dope professor. Dope, by the way, for those who are listening, means good, not the drugs, nor the seven doors. But where I grew up means good, right? So this guy, great professor, he was like the Dead Poet Society type of professor, late Robin Williams, like Carpe Diem. We would sit in the middle of the room and do nothing for 10 minutes and then write a 10-page paper about it. Right? Just one of the amazing professors. But he had us read a book that has been profound in my way of living and way of being. And it was a book called Dialogue: The Art of Thinking Together by William Isaacs. And I remember in reading this book, he talked about that it's not about A and it's not about B, but oftentimes that's what we're doing. I'm coming to convince you of A, Melissa, and you're trying to convince me of B. And so now we're having war, all right? And I'm getting allies to agree with me and da 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 and all these media stuff. But it's like, what if we created C together? What if we looked at ways that we actually created something together in a collective way? That because not everything's black and white, right? There's very few things in my brain that are really core black and white. There's often this thin line of gray if we choose to lean into it and choose to see it. So to your point, there are times where we're like, oh, I'm unsure. And there's times even for those people who are sure or feel that they're sure, there's still this place of shared humanity, right? And don't get me on the media, right? As a former radio host, I know how that whole game plays, right? I was a radio show host for NPR in Baltimore for about 3 years, had a weekly show. And I remember the two different types of shows that we'd have and what that would elicit in our listeners. I have a show that was like, the criminal justice system and reform and how can we better improve it or the educational system. And it was like crickets, people calling in, right? But then I'd have a show around fraternities and sororities and oh my gosh, everybody's lining up. And I'm just like, because it was very polarizing and that's what we're conditioned to respond to. So one of the reasons I left the media, but I just realized it's like, that's what media is designed to do. They want to keep you listening. They want you to be angry. They want you to hear that most polarizing perspective so that you'll tune in and keep listening because it's about the ratings and it's about their money and it's all those things. And so people who are doing true heart work, oftentimes you're not going to see that in the mainstream. That's why I love podcasts like yours and others that are really dealing with the heart of issues because it gives people an opportunity to actually hear nuanced perspectives. Right. One really cool thing, again, I'm all about practical action. It's just in our research, we found this really cool group called the Human Library. And they would host events all around the world where people are the books. And so you would come and you would sit in a circle and you would hear from this library and you'd hear their experience, their story. And it would range everywhere from different religions to people who are polyamorous to people who have been sex offenders. I mean, it was a range of things and hearing their perspective, their journey, their story, and be able to ask them honest questions. Uh, until we get to this place, right? And again, not all of us are designed in every single moment to ask a whole bunch of questions. There's sometimes I'm like, Justin needs some time just to breathe. I need some time just to kind of connect with myself and feel I'm in a place of safety. But there's other times where I'm like, hey, it's time to be a little bit uncomfortable. I'd be a little bit uncomfortable. So I appreciate you challenging people and getting to the heart of it's the human being in front of me. It's the human being across from me, right? I love that you didn't get on the spending less time doing the social media response because research overwhelmingly shows our medium impacts how people receive it. So if I really want to have a disagreement with people, I'm not going to do it online because they can read into no matter how carefully I type it, it can be misread. Now, the research shows I don't need to actually have a face-to-face interaction with you. You can tell my tone. They say you're getting the same impact just by hearing my voice. So I love when people leave voice notes. It doesn't even need to be synchronous. You can leave a voice note and share what you're saying, and that will have just as much impact as if somebody hearing you and seeing you at the same time. But written forms of communication, emails, online posts, those are the ones that are vastly and widely more misinterpreted and misread. And so I think we need to be careful on the mediums that we use and choose to lean into in disagreements.
I went through a phase where instead of just leaving a voice note, I would actually do it with the animoji. So it'd be like a cat saying whatever serious thing I'm sending over. Like, get mad at me now. But
I love that.
there's even something online now, like rage baiting is a thing. And it's how a lot of different accounts are growing really quickly is that they're doing something that's called rage baiting. And so I'm thinking of one account, for example, it gets millions of views. And she's like, what I feed my 1-year-old for breakfast. And she does this thing where she like throws the plate down. And so everything's to really show how she just doesn't care. But I mean, it is kind of sad because I think she actually is feeding her kid this. It'll show her kid eating it and it'll be like 18 mini donuts and like a bowl of Skittles. And I'm just like, well, first of all, I think you're abusing your child for views, but also, see, look, I'm getting rage just thinking about it. And that is how she's growing her account. And people are doing it all over the place where they're posting controversial things because they're following what the media has always done, posting the controversial headline. And, it's difficult not to follow money when there's a huge corporation of people making decisions looking at numbers. The humanity gets lost when you're like 18 layers deep of the decision. And then there's all these other people that are just trying to like make a living, figure out something to do. And they're like, well, this worked for me. And so then they follow that, it's like Pavlov's dogs. They're salivating over the reward. But I say that to remind people that do you want to put your peace in somebody else's hands so easily? And so even if it's just becomes the practice of, oh yes, an opportunity for me to maintain balance when I deeply disagree with what's going on in front of me, with what the person's saying, and make it a different practice, because it's really hard to kind of step out of that and be like, okay, I'm just going to have a respectful conversation. It's like easier if you're focusing on something like the curiosity piece, like you mentioned before. Okay, I'm going to focus on curiosity here rather than I'm going to be a monk and come out, like one's vague, one's specific, or let me just focus on breathing through this conversation, things like that. And so that's what I love about your book is that there's so many just actionable, like, let me focus on this time and things that'll, instead of being this, we've done a lot of episodes actually on similar topics, but it's this more broad mindset change, which is just really difficult to embody without those. With level 1, these 3 exercises I will do in this conversation, because those are the things that actually build the neural pathways to enable us to have a different response versus, I mean, nobody's sitting there being triggered and like, what do I want? What change do I want to see in the world? And it's too many layers of distance between it.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. I mean, I think that's why my number 1 strength finder is strategic. I'm also one of my top 5 is woo as well. So, And some you know don't see those things go together, but it's about patterns. And it's my MBA was focused on leadership and organizational change, and so I bring a lens of change management to this, and how do we personally and or even for leaders organizationally change, and creating these spaces where people can respectfully disagree. I'll kind of give two quick things. From a leadership perspective, it's vital to encourage respectful disagreement in your meetings, and reward that. And so one of the things I consistently tell my team, we have a team both here and in Ghana, is friction actually makes us better. Healthy conflict is not bad. Healthy conflict helps us to create solutions that we didn't think about as individuals. And so we need that. And so I reward and verbally reward, like, hey, Dari, thank you so much for sharing that perspective about why you think my idea won't work. I think it can help to improve the idea, right? And so it's about rewarding it versus just oftentimes as leaders, we can just shut people down. And then people know from a cultural or historical perspective, I shouldn't bring up something that the leader's going to disagree with because I'm just going to get shut down. And so it's up to us as leaders to help to continue to cultivate that because of those power differentials and things that exist there. But the second piece of this is as we engage people in real life, it's these small practical things that begin to shape us, right? One of the things about learning, right? Because I'm always asking a question instead of just how do we do it? I'm asking the question, why don't people do it? So we can address those pieces too. And one aspect of learning, they call it the inverted U theory. An inverted U theory simply is there's two places where it's likely going to be very ineffective for us to learn something different and or new. It's when we think we know absolutely everything on said topic, as well as when we think we know absolutely nothing. And so one of the big pieces is how do we start slowly snowballing people in to understanding and growing in knowledge of an area. That's why the Circles of Grace Challenge is really powerful because I just took recently the Ford Family Foundation through the Circles of Grace Challenge where all the members of their staff went through it. And we did at the end of the 6 months, we came back and talked through it and they were like, wow. And some of the people that they serve in their constituents, they were like, man, like there's so many things that I didn't know, right? Or there's things I disagreed with that I didn't know exactly where it came from, but now I better understand. And there's still some people like, yeah, I disagreed, but I had firsthand information where I could still engage the humanity of that person and still disagree. And I think once we take those some people call it baby steps. For me, I call it the tortoise approach, right? That's why the tortoise is a big thing, and the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise has been mislabeled all these years, y'all. The tortoise wasn't slow. The tortoise was strategic, right? We only called the tortoise slow because we compared it to the hare. And we saw what happened to the hare. The hare was really flashy. It looked really good, but it didn't have long-lasting, sustainable growth. And that's what we're after with this conversation, is how do we build this into who people are rather than just something that they have to do when they get to these disagreements. And so that's, to your point, Melissa, like we're after these tangible, practical ways to start building the habit where it becomes second nature. So you may say, hey, Justin, it's hard to listen to the power of three. It's hard for me still, all right? I still struggle at times listening to the power of three. And I'm listening to my daughter like, okay, so what did Annabeth do again? Okay, and the ball went out the cafeteria. All right, okay, all right. And so what happened with the ball? Right? Like I don't really care about the ball, right? I may loosely care about Annabelle, but guess what I do care about? And one way I know that she feels valued, one way I know that I leave her with a sense of dignity and worth is by deeply and meaningfully listening to her. And that's one practical thing every single one of us can do.
If you were to leave listeners with one of these actionable things to focus on for this week, which one do you feel would be the most impactful for them to just ground this all into their reality?
I'm going to ground it in the first pillar. We didn't talk about that. And I think the first pillar is actually the foundation of all this. And the first pillar of the 5 pillars is challenge your perspective. Challenge your perspective. So the practical way to lean into the challenging perspective is maybe identifying with family and friends, people you know and love and trust, or an issue that doesn't get you to a boiling point, and lean in to finding out and researching it. Lean into asking questions. Lean into engaging, right? We use the same thing. When we talk about allyship, we use the same kind of process and model. We call it the 3x5 beginner allyship model, but it is really just a great way to learn about a topic. What are the top 3 books on this area? The top 3 articles? Kind of talk to 3 people. What are the top 3 like videos or things, as well as peer-reviewed journal articles? All right, and we call it the 3x5. But it's about how to identify this basis and foundation of learning to simply challenge my perspective. Why is this important? Because when we challenge our perspective, I'm not even talking about any disagreement yet. It helps us to build the muscles so that when we're in those moments, it's easier, or we're more ready to be able to listen with a heart to learn rather than to lecture. We have a better capability to fill in the gaps with curiosity rather than conclusions. It helps us to more easily seek the gray rather than the black and white, and to ultimately focus on how do I humanize others rather than harm them. But it starts off with that first pillar, challenging your perspective. So this week, will you talk to a family member that might have diverging views and just ask to hear their story? That, hey, we haven't talked about X. Can you tell me more about that? All right. We talk about the 5 I don't knows. So maybe there's aspects of your family members or things about them, and talk to 5 people that you don't know something about that could be a way to start challenging your perspective. The more and more we build those muscles, the more it becomes just a part of who we are. Like the same thing that you said, you started doing these small practices, and it started leading into just becoming a part of your way of being. And that's what we're after. So challenging your perspective this week, by choosing to hear other people's stories, gauging the power of 3, listening deeply, asking, tell me more. The last thing I'd mention, if people are up to it, not everybody's up to it, but it's an interesting challenge. We have a thing we call the no disagreement challenge, and we just challenge people for 24 hours to not disagree with anyone, at least externally. And just ask more questions and listen. And if you have to disagree because of your position or power, or you're in a meeting and you have to give your perspective, to do it only after you've engaged in the power of 3, and do it in a way that focuses on humanizing others. So these are all very practical things. Listen deeply, power of 3, a no disagreement challenge if you're spicy, to make it really stick. I want to be very clear. This is not just about transactions and what to do in those disagreements. This is about how do we start transforming ourselves to be better conversational partners with people, whether they agree with us or not.
Well, thank you so much for all of the research. Like I said, the very actionable things. It reminds me of when I was learning to say no. I was actually Googling like exact phrases I can say to say no to people. And I had to practice that way. It's like steal like an artist. First, just go with the structure. Then it starts to integrate into who you are and you get the ability. And this just has so many of those. And so for listeners that want to learn more, want to go deeper, want to learn about the things that we didn't even have time to cover in this already fascinating episode, where is the best place for people to connect and find your book?
Yeah, so the website howtorespectfullydisagree.com is where people can really go, and if they're not sure, you can download the first chapter and all that kind of stuff and see some of the videos and our approach to it. So that's the best way. And then I love LinkedIn. So connected with me, Justin Jones-Fosu on LinkedIn, because I like actually interacting with people, and you don't have to agree with me, so which is fun.
All the links for this episode will be at mindlove.com/351. Your challenge for this week is to simply challenge your perspective. But I'd love to challenge you to take this a little bit further. I want to add an instead here, because so often we don't even realize that we're already wrapped up into defending or explaining our beliefs. And then it's the end of the conversation and we think, maybe we could have done better. Or maybe you don't think that, but I do sometimes. So try to trigger yourself to challenge your perspective in the middle of that trigger or right before you even respond. I'm thinking of my friend who asks questions and tries to understand me and why I believe that versus the belief that I'm talking about in general. This is something that I have been really working on evolving and adapting in my life because just like the story I told in the beginning of this, I don't want to be known for my beliefs. I want to be known for the way I approach beliefs, the way I approach my life, the way I approach my relationships. And I think that's such a stronger core to stand on because it allows you the flexibility to really take in your life and shift your perspectives and beliefs as you learn more information. And the more that we're known for the specifics, the more we remain anchored there. And like we talked about in this interview, no matter how sure you are in your belief system, there's always room to change. Every belief I've ever had, I thought I felt pretty sure in it until I wasn't. So it's just something to think about. If you want help figuring out that deeper truth of what you stand for, Soul Strength Activation might be perfect for you. We have another cohort opening up, so reach out to me if you want to apply or have a conversation about whether or not it's right for you. There were some really huge transformations. I have life-changing testimonials to show you, so reach out to me at mindlovemelissa or send me an email. You can find all my sponsors at mindlove.com/sponsors. And we also have an amazing transformative retreat coming up. And actually, somebody just upgraded their room. So one of the lower tier rooms just opened up. Reach out to me if you want to know more about that. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning into Your Higher Frequency with Mind Love. Head to mindlove.com for a free gift to keep your vibes up until next week.